Welcome back. The showdown over regulating daily fantasy sports sites like FanDuel and DraftKings heats up. At the core of the fight, the companies argue it is a legal game of skill, but several lawmakers contend it is a game of chance. That would mean the business is gambling and, as a result, illegal. David Boies is the chairman of Boies, Schiller and Flexner and is representing DraftKings. He is with us right now. David, good to see you.
Good to see you.
So how do you make the case that, in fact, this is a game of skill?
Well,
is that what this all comes down to?
Well, first of all, anybody that's played it knows it's a game of skill. The people who are talking about being a game of chance have never played it, and if they played it, they'd lose, because it is something that requires people to know what they're doing, to study the statistics, to study what's going on, to make really complicated choices. And the reason that you know it's a game of skill is, first, the same people consistently win. That doesn't happen in a game of chance. If you're playing roulette or throwing the dice, you can't know what they're going to happen. You can't predict it. Here you can predict how it's going to come out based on the skill of the people. The other thing is people get better as they play it more. You don't get any better playing the dice the longer you play it. I know that from experience.
Okay.
Here, when you get better playing a game, it's because you're learning something. If you're learning something about a game, it means it's a game of skill.
So this is the argument that you have to make and get the buy-in for. This has been going on a long time, fantasy sports.
It really has. It really has. I mean, fantasy sports, I really don't have a good answer for that. It's really hard to understand how something that everybody has accepted as legal for years. I mean, daily fantasy sports have been around for 8 years. No prosecutor, not in New York, not any place else, ever thought it was illegal before. It doesn't become illegal overnight. If there's a problem, if people think that it ought to be regulated, something ought to happen, there ought to be some additional restrictions on it, that's for the legislature. It's not to go into court and say, let's just change the law. That's something that ought to be up to the legislature.
So these companies, DraftKings and FanDuel, continue to operate in New York through at least January 14th. When a panel of judges decide if this injunction stays in place. Navigate the next couple of weeks for us. How does this play out?
Well, right now, both sides are preparing briefs, and we'll put briefs into the New York Appellate Court. Those briefs will be in on January 4, and the court will then decide whether to continue the stay. And then we'll ultimately decide whether to reverse or affirm the lower court's decision. This is obviously important because everybody's watching New York. This is the first state to actually test in court the legality of DraftKings and FanDuel and Yahoo. I mean, Yahoo's sort of skating along under the surface.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned Yahoo because you don't hear about Yahoo.
You don't hear much about it. But this is something in which you've had all sorts of people look at this over and over again. I mean, Fox Sports is second largest investor in DraftKings. CBS is in it.
Right.
Yahoo. The Kraft family, a whole series of people that you know are not going to be involved in anything illegal.
Yeah, which is why the public has gotten involved. How much of a factor is the public opinion here? Or the people who are engaged and operating on these sites? Well,
I think public opinion is an important thing here, because when people say, don't take away this form of entertainment that I like. Don't be the nanny state that comes in and says, no, you can't do this. After 8 years of enjoying it, now we've decided you can't do it anymore. I think that's not a good political decision, and I think that's going to have an effect.
I want to ask you about two other issues, so let me get to those, because I want to ask you about the conflict that's going on right now in the country about national security and privacy, and what the technology companies should be doing. And then I have to ask you about Theranos, which of course is in the Wall Street Journal today.
Again.
Yes, again. But the U.S. government telling technology companies, look, we need to basically snoop on communication. We need to tap into your user data. Tim Cook from Apple basically saying, look, we allow a back door of government to come in and snoop. Some evil person will be able to do the same. So there is no way to actually just give the government access just because they're looking for terrorist communication. What's your take on this?
Well, I think there are ways of restricting this to the government. And remember, when the government comes in, the government can't just come in and snoop on people's private data without any court looking at it, or without any kind of protections or guidelines. We're in a situation in which we're making very complicated balances between personal privacy and national security. And I think that the government is making a real attempt to both increase security, but at the same time respect people's privacy. And I think that it's important that we not get in a situation in which stuff is so encrypted that the government doesn't have a way, even with a search warrant, to get at this information.
Right.
You wouldn't be able to lock it up and get it away from a search warrant if you were putting it into a safe. You shouldn't be able to lock it up just because it's electronic. If the government has a search warrant, has probable cause to think terrorism or some other crime is going on, the government's got to have a way to get at that data.
All right, so you think then there is a way for America to have privacy as well as national security?
I think so, but
with a search warrant.
But you want to have court control, you want to have a search warrant, you want to have protections. But with those protections, I think you've got to give the government the ability to go in and get the bad guys.
Yeah, all right, let me move on to Theranos. The Journal first broke this a couple of months ago, talking about complaints about Theranos. Now, U.S. regulators are probing this drug testing company, Theranos, over its lab, its research practices. You're the outside counsel, a director of Theranos. This company has among the top in business and the country in terms of on its board of directors. Really high profile and impressive board. Has Theranos been effective, and has it ever done anything wrong?
It's not done anything wrong, and it's been very effective, as it's had millions and millions of tests run reliably in Arizona, which is the first state it was rolled out on. Now, you say there's a probe. The reason you say it's a probe, because that's what the Wall Street Journal headline
Right, the Journal is reporting it's a probe, right?
And that's just irresponsible reporting.
Is that right?
Okay, it is.
So there's no probe going on?
It depends what you mean by a probe. This is a regulated industry. They're being regulated all the time. There are complaints all the time. The government investigates them. The government hasn't come back and said the tests are unreliable. One of the problems right now is that people look at a headline like this and they believe it. And this is, I don't know whether this is the 8th, 10th, 12th article in the Wall Street Journal. I think it's unfortunate. I respect the Journal. It's a great newspaper. They've got their facts terribly wrong in this particular instance, and they just won't recognize it. They're so dug in.
Yeah.
They're just so dug in that they just don't have an open mind.
I've met with Elizabeth Holmes, the CEO of Theranos, and I was very impressed in terms of what she's been able to do in coming up with a better way, an easier way to get blood.
Exactly.
But the Journal is talking about this complaint filed in September by a former Theranos lab employee to the Centers for Medical and Medicaid Services, alleging that management instructed lab employees to keep testing patients with the company's own blood analysis devices, despite indications of major stability, precision, and accuracy problems with those devices. This is from the Journal.
And it's from the Journal, and it's an anonymous source. You know, nobody's seen this supposed complaint. Nobody's been able to test the complaint. The regulatory agency hasn't even come to us with this complaint. Maybe there's a complaint there, maybe it's not. One of the real problems with the Journal's reporting on Theranos is the constant use of anonymous sources, competitors sniping, sometimes a disgruntled employee, people who you can't know who they are, you can't confront it, you can't find out the facts. That is just irresponsible reporting.
Real quick on AIG, I know you're still in touch with Hank Greenberg, and he's been pushing and pushing in terms of change after the government acquired AIG, but AIG, it comes out to be a positive story since they paid the government back all the money. They paid all the money back with interest, and they made more than $20 billion of profits on the stock that they improperly confiscated. And now I think AIG is recovering slowly. Does Hank Greenberg want anything else at this point?
Well, he wants the shareholders to get compensated. And we've got to go through the appeals to be sure that that's so. But what he wants to do is he wants the shareholders to get compensated for what the government improperly took back in the financial crisis. Yep. I remember. David, good to have you on the program. Great to be here. Thank you so much for joining us. David Boies joining us there.